Hey all, new day, new verse as we wrap up chapter 17, starting in verses 24 to the very end, payment of the temple tax. It's an interesting bit here, and I had to remind myself before digging in that we in this series haven't quite gotten yet to the whole paying taxes thing whose face is on it just yet. That's in chapter 22. But keeping that in mind, let's dig in here. Payment of the temple tax. Verse 24. On their arrival in Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter and asked him, "Doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax?" "Yes, he does," Peter replied. Then he went into the house. But before he had a chance to speak, Jesus asked him, "What do you think, Simon? Do kings tax their own people or the people they have conquered?" "They tax the people they have conquered," Peter replied. "Well then," Jesus said, "the citizens are free. However, we don't want to offend them. So go down to the lake and throw in a line. Open the mouth of the first fish you catch, and you will find a large silver coin. Take it and pay the tax for both of us." And there is that section about who pays the conquered. It's more their sons or others. I think the idea of the conquered or the conquerors, the family who's actually paying the tax, this translation of it, I think is interesting. But all of it seems to bring up questions for me. For the fact that the idea of a temple tax, well, number one, this is Capernaum. It's nowhere near Jerusalem where the second temple is. So there's questions there. The other bit, too, is that when referencing the temple tax, it's bringing up laws in Exodus and in Nehemiah, reiterating that idea. And I find myself kind of wondering, well, the original tax here idea was in census, the being ransom idea. And it's why David got in so much trouble when he did a census, because generally in the ancient world, if you did a census, you were saying you own these people, and it's a lot of cultural curiosity. But the more thing I wonder about it is that the temple tax here initially was to help pay for keeping the temple in order. And the tax was more derived from, a lack of tithe, really. A lack of offering. Because, this verse, some people want to use it to talk about taxes in the West and that whole thing. I have no interest in it. That's not the point here. That kind of idea we'll get to in chapter 22. What I wanted to talk about here is where the temple tax came from, the offering of the heart that's actually meant to be with it, and Jesus' response to Simon Peter. So, as far as digging into it, this temple tax kind of only came about because the people weren't giving an offering like they did with the building of the tabernacle in Exodus. They basically had to have something instituted to help pay for the temple. And I do believe God put the law in there purely for an understanding that not everybody wants to give. And I know it feels a little apropos with the season or on the nose. It's not my intent. My intent here is about how we go about it. Now, granted, in here you have Jesus, aside from the fact that he's saying, why Simon rather than Peter. But I think it's the frustrated that Peter, or Simon in this moment, is answering for Jesus. Because as far as the temple tax is concerned, Jesus is God made flesh. He understands what the real temple is. As we come to find out later, us, and that we are being a shape, much like you see in Ephesians. And I think it's interesting that Jesus here doesn't want to go out of his way to offend. Not on things like this. Because it's very clear to me that the idea of money seems almost trivial to him. Which, kind of makes sense. The silver coin that pays for the both of them, rather than just the single coin that would pay for each. It's just in the mouth of a fish. Like, fine, whatever. Just throw in a line, get a fish, pay for it. I don't care. Because a lot of the temple tax areas come from this lack of offering, come from this lack of generosity and giving. And I'm not talking about fiat currency or fiscal things like that. I don't care. Much akin to it's like, oh no, look, I make Hannah from heaven. Here's silver. Go away. We serve a God that can do that. He's more interested to me, I believe, and that's what we see throughout the Bible, interested, and I know I've already hinted on it here before, in the gifts we have and how we can use those to bless others. And the temple tithe idea of giving to help resource it and make it better, for us, we now equate everything to money, but for them, it was actually things that could be used to help others. Coats, cloaks, food, shelter. And I'm holding two things at once moment in regards to the fact that we still have that today. Sorrow in the fact that, we still have the poor and needy today. Hopeful in the fact that Jesus said it would be like this until he returns. So it's consistent with what he spoke. Sad reality. One that we can work to change. We can be the hands and feet. And so asking us here about, Jesus, does your teacher pay the temple tax? Well, why would Jesus get frustrated at Simon Peter? Because he's answering a question that's completely inconsequential. Because the temple tax is derived from a misunderstanding in the first place. You don't have to put in a tax to make sure the temple is taken care of if people actually care about the temple. You don't need to try to wring somebody's arm for charity if people were being truly charitable. You don't have to try and lay on a guilt trip to get people to do the right thing if it was in the heart to do the right thing in the first place. And I do believe that there are many places where we understand this inherent good that makes us say, we should probably do it. I think there's a whole lot of justification in many of us, most of us, if we're honest, all of us in some regard. I mean, it's getting past that, letting Jesus shape our character into being where we no longer do that. We're still all working toward that state where we can start to reflect that character. Is it easy? No. But eventually you do something long enough and it becomes part of your character. Giving in all that you have and more faith, like the woman with the 2 coins. Again, I know, spoilers for ahead. But with this area here, I know it's a quick one. I know it doesn't really seem to delve in too much. It's because, admittedly, I'm still being learned on it. When I first read through this, I was very anti-authoritarian. I read it and looked at it as see, Pete's getting called out for saying pay your taxes. I'm finding more and more, no, that's not the case here. It's for answering a question that's a misreading in the first place, a misfocus in the first place. The point that he has been trying to get out with all of this, the kingdom of heaven is here. Get into that personal relationship with God. Turn to him. Get into that place where he and you are in that communicative relationship. Because if you're in that kind of place, and God is building the temple that is us, working as he does and says he will through Ephesians, through Paul, then suddenly you don't have to worry about the idea of a temple tax or the reading of the law that way to worry about it. I mean, Ezra and Nehemiah being one book, mind you, split up because of scroll length and what have you, but originally one idea. Ezra and Nehemiah. And throughout the entire book, you have a moment over and over and over again, where it's this interpretation of letter versus spirit. And I think that's why Jesus says, what do you think, Simon? It's because the question itself was from a faulty premise. The question, does your teacher pay the temple tax? Well, why do you have the temple tax in the first place? Well, because that's how we're reading the law here. The section that says you should be giving generously? Because Exodus 30, 13 through 16, Exodus 30:13 through 16, which is what it's a reference to, is, I can find it, I had my card here book. Each person who is counted must give a small piece of silver as a sacred offering to the Lord. And this is talking about the census. You got to read in context, right? So you go back in context, verse 11. Then Yahweh said to Moses, whenever you take a census of the people of Israel, each man who is counted must pay a ransom for himself to Yahweh. Then no plague will strike the people as you count them. Each person who is counted must give a small piece of silver as a sacred offering to the Lord. The payment is half a shekel based on the sanctuary shekel. So, and of course it goes on to say those who have reached the 20th birthday and must give this sacred offering. So why exactly would a temple tax have anything to do with a law that's based on a census? That's what I was trying to get to at the core idea here at the very beginning of starting this today. Why does Jesus get frustrating? Because it's a faulty premise. The entire idea of the original Exodus law here is saying during a census you have to pay that ransom because you're being ransomed. In this moment, Jesus has come to ransom all of humanity. And the entire thing gets muddled because of a faulty question. Something that happened once before in the garden. Answering a faulty question. And I think it is a curiosity here that Jesus says, we don't want to offend them, so go get the coin from the fish. And the reason I find this curious is because he seems to offend Pharisees and Sadducees a lot. In fact, he calls them out a lot. Very soon here, we're going to get to a point where he gets into a bit of a battle of wits, and I'm hazard to call it that because, you're matching wits with God. You're not going to win. But he's loving enough to let you have fun. He understands the spirit versus the letter of it. And he's come to ransom everyone. So when asked about a temple tax, it was a faulty premise. He gets frustrated and has Peter go get it. Because he doesn't want to offend about something that's inconsequential. If he's going to offend somebody, or if he's going to say something that offends somebody, he wants it to be about something that matters. And yes, he does, well, isn't it in reflection to a law? Yes. He's the fulfillment of the law. And I think that's why he gives the answer that he does. We are his, so we are free. It's as simple as that. Whom the Son sets free is free indeed. All of it drawing back together to the beauty of redemption that Christ gives on the cross. And when in that relationship, sending His Holy Spirit so we can walk with Him. Because I promise you, reading this verse about resource, it doesn't work. It's too shallow. And the reason I say that is because God is the God of all resource. In the same chapter of Exodus, we have manna from heaven, water from rocks. More meat than they know what to do with. From the quail that swarmed them, and that was given in irritation. So we don't have to worry about those kind of needs. We need to get into the question of where God's working with our soul. The whole of us. Letting Him work in us, letting Him change us, letting Him shift from the creation we were to the new creation we are to be. His creation, molded by the potter's hands. And I believe that's why He says, well then, the citizens are free. As I close up here, I think about a story that was shared with me in one of my women's groups. It was Story about a lady who had been praying diligently for groceries because she didn't have food. And she had a neighbor who would make fun of her constantly about her praying. You know, you really think God's going to do that? You really think He's going to move in miracles? You really think He's going to feed you? And so this guy, making fun of the lady, and decides that as to a way to make fun of her, goes and gets the groceries and drops them on her front porch. And the woman comes out and starts praising God and said, "See, the Lord brought me food. The Lord got me food. The Lord got me food." And the guy comes out and says, "No, he didn't, you moron. I paid for him." And the lady replies with, "The Lord got me food, and He made the devil pay for it." And I think that's the kind of moment that we're invited here to with this response. Faith that God will see to it, and He'll make the enemy pay for it, because we're free. Walk in that trust. Walk in that reassurance. Walk in that peace. And I promise you, when you rest in the knowledge that He goes before, placing a hedge of protection, going behind, surrounding us with His love and His mercy, that no weapon formed against you shall prosper. It's not an ism or a bumper sticker expression or a rah-rah chant. It is a truth. And it is a truth derived not just from hope, but from experience. That the weapon shall not prosper. Because God uses all things to His glory. So there's peace. Because even if the moment is difficult or trying, God has set us free. Set us free from the ways and rules and rulers, spiritual rulers here, hear me, the principalities and the spirits, so that we can walk free, sharing the love, sharing the mercy, and not have to care about the inconsequentialities of concept of resource. And believe me, I do understand if you are in a place where thinking about resources, like, well, it's money, how am I supposed to pay for rent? Doesn't seem very inconsequential when you're facing it. I know. God knows. That's why later in we'll see very interesting place about the woman who puts in more than she has to spare. Because she gives in faith, not in sight. Knowing that God is the provider, not the world. Knowing that He will see to every need. So even if the world says, what about? We can say, but God will see to it. He'll see me through it, because He has set me free. I will see you guys tomorrow when we begin chapter 18. I'm looking forward to it because it's a discussion of the greatest in the kingdom. And it's really not what you'd think it is, but compared to the world standards. I'll see you guys later. May His favor be upon you. Know that you are loved, and know He will see you through it. Just hold to Him, because He does it just for the sake of His name and the love He has for you. I'll see you then.